And Lynn Valenter, thank you so much for joining us. Do you mind testing your audio for us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much. Brendan, hi, this is Kirsten. Do you mind testing your audio for us? And Brendan, if you don't mind trying one more time. Okay. Secretary Millar, thanks so much for joining us. Do you mind testing your audio for us?
Happy to. How's that sound?
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Greg, I see we have you with us. Do you mind testing your audio? Greg, do you mind trying again?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
Great, thank you. And Brendan, do you mind trying to test your audio one more time?
Yeah, sorry, I was just connecting in. Hi, Kristen. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much. And I see we have President Peterson joining. Do you mind testing your audio for us?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you so much. And Doug Kelsey, welcome. Do you mind testing your audio for us?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Great, thanks so much.
Okay.
Yes, I can, thank you.
And Kirsten, this is Deb. Do you want to go ahead and promote Sonia if you haven't already? I'm not sure if she's there on the attendees list.
Yes, I just promoted her.
So great. Sonia, you want to go ahead and do a sound check for us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Yes, we hear you. Thank you. Okay, and good afternoon, everybody.
And
This
Janelle,
is Deb
do you mind
Needleman. Oops, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry about that, Deb. Janelle, do you mind testing your audio for us, please?
Sure. How am I coming in?
Great, thank you so much. And Chris Reagan, too, please.
Good afternoon.
Looks like she's muted again.
Chris, can you
Great,
do that one
thanks,
more
Chris.
time?
And we did get a bit of an echo.
Yeah, this is Chris. Does that sound better?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. And Kirsten, this is Deb Noodleman. I just wanted to say hello to folks that are here. We're still welcoming a few more people. I see Kristen Leonard just joined us. Good morning, good afternoon.
I almost said good morning as well, Deb. Like,
Reading each other's minds. I was looking at you trying to get the words out.
hello.
Hi, your sound definitely works, and we're glad to have you with us.
And Sean, thanks so much for joining us. Do you mind testing your audio?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think it looks like we're waiting on one of our CAD co-chairs, Ed Washington. Is that correct? Do you want to look and
That's
see
correct,
in case?
Deb, and I'm not seeing him join yet.
Okay, all right. Why don't I just give it another minute and then we'll probably get started because we have a lot, as always, a full agenda. I just want to remind folks that when we do start the meeting, if our executive steering group members would kindly turn on their video, we'd be grateful. And thank you again to those of you in the audience for listening in today. We really appreciate you being here. And Kirsten, you tell me if you see Ed now, and then I might have us just get started with the openings.
I do not see him yet.
Okay. Can you just, when he comes in, go ahead and promote him and remind me, we'll do a sound check for him, okay?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Why don't we go ahead and get started? I think we did know that Director Strickler was going to be a little bit late, and so Brendan Finn, as alternate, you're kindly sitting in until he gets here, correct? Okay.
That's right, Deb.
Yes, so I think we then have everybody else that's able to attend today, and welcome. This is Deb Noodleman, part of the IBR team. So glad to see all of you. We hope you had a good holiday and welcome back, and that you're also staying safe and healthy. I'd like to do just some quick logistics. Kirsten, if you can go to the next couple slides, and then I'm going to hand it over to Greg for the welcome. So just as a heads up to people, we do have closed captions today in both English and Spanish, and hopefully folks can see on the screen that we have a link that people can click on to get their closed captions in English, and then off to the right on the screen, we have another link that you can click to get your closed captions in Spanish. Hope that's helpful. If needed in the audience, next slide. And then just really quickly for the instructions, at the bottom middle of your screen, if you see that circled red area, you should see a menu of options. And if you can't see the menu, just hover your mouse over it in the middle of the screen to click on closed captions, and a separate window will pop up for you. Okay, and so just want to make sure people have that information. And then just really quickly, we know so many of you use webinars regularly, but first and foremost, thank you for joining us today. We're hoping that you'll join by either audio, phone, or computer, not both, otherwise you get that background noise. And that for the panelists, we've already said to our executive steering group members, if you could turn your video on, and thank you. So we actually feel like we're in the room together. And of course, that reminder to just keep your audio on mute when you're not speaking. And if there are any technical difficulties, there's a phone number here you can call or text to get assistance. We're not using the chat box in these meetings. So the phone number is 253-241-0131. Again, it's 253-241-0131. Okay, and then I think we're on to the next piece, and I'll have some other logistical updates afterwards, but the main welcoming piece to the audience is to remind you that later in the meeting, we have an opportunity for brief public input. It is brief, and so we also offer the chance for you to provide your input either before or after the meeting by emailing comments to info@interstatebridge.org. and put ESG Public Comment in the subject line. You can also call into a phone number and leave a voicemail that will be transcribed, and that's 360-905-1560, 360-905-1560. And we've used this approach before, and it seems to go pretty well. I'll explain it later when I go through the agenda, but it's a chance where we can divide up the time we have today for anyone that wants to provide public input on the topics we're dealing with today. We're trying really hard to use our time carefully in these short meetings. And then if there are any additional comments that we can't receive today, we're going to ask people to either email or call in those comments. Okay, and so now I think we're ready. Next slide. For the welcome. And Greg Johnson, Program Administrator, we're going to have you take it from here. Thank you.
All right, excellent. So good afternoon, everybody. members of ESG and the listening audience. So once again, my name is Greg Johnson, Program Administrator, and I'd like to welcome you to, this is actually part 2 of the Executive Steering Group, where we're moving some of the administrative functions that need to happen to make this group go forward. So one of the key things that I want to pass along to this group is last week we met with the Bi-State Legislative Committee. We had a very informative meeting. One of the key things that we talked about was the decision-making graphic, and we did receive the go-ahead as a workable way to provide information and to bring consensus decisions forward to that group. So that was very well received. We also had a rollout of a preview of the conceptual finance plan, and had some very good questions wrapped around that. That was probably the highlight of the meeting, that presentation and discussion. And we are tomorrow, being December 1st, we are obligated to have both a draft conceptual finance plan as well as a legislative progress report submitted to the Washington legislature. So those things are in progress. We're also submitting to Oregon legislature as part of our duties and responsibilities. So 2 important things happening tomorrow, and those things are in line with the timing and requests from the legislatures. So we are once again clicking on getting the community advisory group moving forward, as well as the equity advisory group. So you're going to hear more about those things later on in the meeting. So we are making great progress. So with that, I'm going to flip it back to Deb to facilitate comments from the ESG.
Great. Thank you so much, Greg, for that warm welcome and for the context. I would like to head once around the virtual table if I could, and just give you each a chance to say good afternoon, any kind of welcoming remarks you might want to say, and if you happen to have any updates from around the region, would be glad to hear it. So if it's okay, I'll go to Secretary Millar first, and then I'll go to Brendan on behalf of Director Strickler.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you believe it is almost December? Looking forward to 2021.
All right. Thank you for those remarks. And Brendan for ODOT.
Yes, we've made it there. Yeah, I do expect Director Strickler to join us shortly. Those may or may not know, ODOT is overseeing the wildfire recovery effort for the state of Oregon, and there was a time-sensitive issue the director had to take care of. So hopefully we'll be seeing his smiling face shortly. Thank you, everyone, for your involvement. Obviously, can't do it without you. I spend a lot of time with your staffs. They're incredibly talented and devoted and doing a fantastic job of helping us get this program up and running and assisting Greg. So thanks for that. I think there's a high level of trust amongst us, and that's what's going to get us there. So just want to express my appreciation on behalf of ODOT for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Welcome. Next up, City of Portland and then City of Vancouver.
Hi, Sonia Szymanski from City of Portland. No updates, and I associate myself with Secretary Millar's comments.
Okay, welcome. City of Vancouver and then RTC.
Good afternoon. I'm Ann McInerney, Mayor for the City of Vancouver, and happy Computer Security Day.
Thank you for that.
I'm Scott Hughes, Chair of the Southwest Washington RTC, and we're glad to be here and be helping everybody, and let's get this program moving.
Great, thank you so much. Metro, then TriMet.
Good afternoon, Lynn Peterson, Metro Council President. Quick update. I would encourage you all to look at the Oregon Zoo Lights this year. It is a drive-through event, and I see former Councilor Ed Washington smiling. It's an amazing event, and it is COVID safe in your car, and you can also order ahead. There have been questions about food. You can actually order some things, so, and other zoo fun things, but it is still happening, and I would encourage you to go get in the season, do something outside, and yeah, it's amazing. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Next up, TriMet and then CTRAN.
Well, I'd like to endorse the zoo tour as a graduate of it this past weekend. It is well worth seeing, and not only for two adults, as we're empty nesters, my wife and I, but bring the kids. You'll have a great time. So, so I'm piling on what Lynn just said, and I think it's showtime. We need to get this thing moving. I think I'm really grateful, Greg, you're here to help us and get through this important problem to solve for our larger region. So let's go.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug. So CTRAN, then the Port of Portland.
Sean Donahue with CTRAN. I would say that not necessarily much of an update. I just want to thank Greg and the team for what I thought was good discussion at the bi-state committee. My only thought in respect to that would be that there was some conversation about the two transportation modes that were listed in the finance plan. I want to make sure that we recognize that those are not our only alternatives to the process, and that we will continue to work through those as we move forward. But I appreciate all the work that was put into it, and I appreciate Greg's leadership on that.
Thank you and welcome, Sean. Next up, Port of Portland and then Port of Vancouver.
Good afternoon, Kristen Leonard with the Port of Portland, and just want to add my thanks for all of the continued work between each of these meetings. It's really amazing, the schedule that everyone's been able to maintain. So thank you all, very much appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Juliana Marler with the Port of Vancouver. I just wanted to share that I did provide an update at our Public Board of Commission meeting last Tuesday, November 24th. Was able to highlight the great work that's been done to date, talked about the charter, and as well as highlighted the community advisory group and equity panel that's being developed, and offered some timelines. So just opportunities to share again all the great work that's happened, and again, very impressed with the amount of staff time that's been going into this, and the materials that we see requires a lot of behind the scenes work. So really appreciate the work that everybody's doing. Thank you.
Thank you, welcome. And then to our CAG co-chairs, first Lynn Valenter and then Ed Washington.
Good afternoon, Lynn Valenter from the Washington side of the river. And just excited that we're in the recruitment phase for membership on the community advisory and equity advisory groups. And so once we get this convened, moving forward, no other updates.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. And then Ed, welcome. We didn't get a chance to check your audio. There you go. You have to unmute if you could. We didn't get a chance when you joined us. There you go.
Well, I was so excited to get in that I forgot to unmute. But I would just say it's a pleasure. I appreciate so very much all of the work that everybody has done up to this point, and it's a lot of reading. So just keep it coming, okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome everybody. We have some other people that you see on the screen that have left their video off for now, and those are your presenters for this meeting. So we want to welcome all of you, and they'll be turning on their video as they speak. And if I could, Kirsten Huggies with my team, go ahead and put up the next slide. So really quickly, your agenda. This is a 2-hour meeting, and we're just finishing up the logistics and agenda piece, and then we'll jump right into the decision space around your executive steering group charter. And as you remember, this is part 2 of your 2-part kickoff meetings. And a critical piece is that you have a charter that gives you, if you will, the process sideboards around your work together. And we are really grateful for the hard work for having developed it. You've done a lot of work between the meeting. And so today the interest is to see if there are any remaining or outstanding issues or concerns. Does it meet up with your interests? And if so, is there concurrence to go ahead and approve the charter? We left you about a half hour on that topic, and we'll give it what it needs for you to have discussion as needed. And then we'll call the question about the decision space. Next topic after that is an update related to the important equity considerations and standing up a community advisory forum. We've talked in the first part of the meeting with the both philosophical, interest-based reasons for having both of these components of the overall program. And today we want to provide an update, and we'll have both Janelle Bell as well as Lisa Schauer to be able to talk with you about that topic, share progress to date, and all the progress yet to come. Very important topics. We then have a brief informational piece with a graphic that helps, we hope, to show the decision flow, where recommendations move throughout the program through these important advisory groups and how they work their way throughout and overall in the process. And so information there, some time for question answer group discussion as we do in all the sections. And then the last big topic is the information of really laying the foundation and groundwork for your efforts in 2021 and going forward. So building familiarity with both the Interstate Bridge replacement NEPA process, and if you will, these important building blocks, I sometimes call them the buckets of work, if you will, that will be rolling out early and as soon as we kick off 2021 and beyond. So lots of good opportunity for information sharing, again, question answer group discussion. We then have about 10 minutes today. It's a shorter time frame, so shorter opportunity for public input, but we're curious to hear, for those of you in the audience that are listening today, if you have some remarks, any input you'd like to give to your executive steering group members. And then we'll be confirming next steps, upcoming meeting topics, and adjourning no later than 3 o'clock. Anybody questions on the agenda itself? Okay, went out in advance. It's posted on the website. We hope people are able to find it. And we also sent you the materials in advance, so hopefully everybody's got what they need. The next slide, just really quickly, the reminder on ground rules. And I know you all know this, but just remembering to honor the agenda, to listening to understand and asking each other questions, staying soft on the people, hard on the problems, seeking common ground wherever possible, and providing balance of speaking time. So if you're not speaking much, it'd be great if you kind of push yourself to jump in a little more. To those of you that are talking a little more, maybe stand back and make space for others. Okay, anybody questions, anything else? Let me just look at my checklist to see if I have anything else I need to say. Did I say nope? Okay, hopefully we're all set to go, and welcome. So the ESG charter, and Greg, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say as we kind of kick off this piece, and then I can take it from there with the process piece.
So we think that having a charter for each of the groups and kind of how each group will interact internally and externally with each other is an important facet of how we plan on getting things done, how we bring questions to each group. So the charter has been an iterative process that our team has listened to comments both from the ESG as well as your staff members. And we hope that we have covered every issue and concern and putting it back together. So with that, Deb, let's jump into it and talk about where we're at.
So Kirsten, if you go to the next slide for just a minute, and thanks so much for that, Greg. It's really helpful context. Everybody, I'm sure, remembers there's these key pieces to the charter. And we did walk through the sections with you last time. We talked a bit at a really high level about why they exist, what the purpose is. And now today, really, we're just doing this final check around the virtual table to see if anybody has any outstanding issues or concerns, or if you're ready to, and if you go to the next slide, Kirsten, we actually have a question we're posing, whether there's ESG concurrence today to finalize and approve the charter. So that's the ask. That's what the question is. And I need 1 second. There's this bright orb in the sky putting sunlight on me. If any of you remember what that is, I have to go close the shade and I'll be right back. So Greg, in case you have anything else about the question itself, and then we're going to start once around the virtual table.
Nothing further as far as a question. This is a key outcome that we need to move the process forward today. So we're looking forward to your input and concurrence.
Whew, thank you. Not used to the bright sun working out of my house. So what I thought I'd do, this is your first check for consensus. And if you were in the room with me sitting around the table, the way I tend to do this is you have those tent cards in front of you with your name on it. And over the years, for whatever reason, the way I've done it is your tent card stays down if there's concurrence. And what that means is that there's alignment and that the interests that you represent have sufficiently been met that you can live with the outcome. Okay, sometimes it means you're getting everything you want. Sometimes it means you've negotiated over time sufficiently to say, I can live with this, that it meets our interests sufficiently. And I always ask, when we're in a consensus-based process where you're collaborating, it's your interests, their interests, and our interests. So you're also standing in each other's shoes and you're saying, how can I help others get their interests met? And what are the joint interests on behalf of this region that we're all here to represent? And that's what this charter is here to accomplish. It's really, again, process guidelines. It's not everything you could ever get to make sure you're never going to have conflict, because you are going to have conflict and difference. These are complex problems you're trying to address together in a collaborative way. So what we're seeking here with your concurrence to approve your charter is to say, this is going to work well enough for us. Okay, we have other topics during the meeting today that are specific substantive issues, and there we're going to be testing whether or not those pieces work for you. Today, in this piece of the agenda is about the charter itself. Okay, so as I head around the table, you can either say yes, and that means your 10 card stays down. No would have been you put your 10 card up to signify you still have issues or concerns. And when I head around, if you still have them, just share them, okay? And then let the group try to work to resolve those issues together. Okay, anybody questions? So I head around the table. So if you don't mind, co-chairs, I was gonna work this backwards from the other direction. And not to put you on the spot, Ed, but what that means is you get to go first. Okay, and then I'll come over to Lynn. So just as a heads up. So from your perspective, are you ready to concur? Is there concurrence for approval of the charter from your perspective?
Yes, am I on again? Yes.
You are on, yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that, Ed. And then Lynn, over to you.
Yes, and I concur.
Okay, thank you. And then Juliana?
I generally concur. I have a procedural question, though, maybe that Deb, I know that you've talked to us about. There's in the community advisory group, there's a discussion about having equal representation or balanced representation between Washington and Oregon. And that's not necessarily identified in the charter, which I'm just curious from a procedural standpoint, is there, you know, kind of what's the process or how does the community advisory group get stood up? And I think that's going to be discussed later in the meeting today. But is there any direct correlation with the charter, I guess is my question.
Yeah. And it was a lovely question. And we did do some talking about this between your November 6th meeting and today. And a little bit of what I was responding to is that in the charter itself, there were discussions during your partnering work that you didn't want to get too specific about either a 2x2 with each state, or that if this interest is represented, then this other interest is equal, because it's less about each one having the equal numbers and more about the interests for Washington and Oregon to be represented sufficiently that those voices are at the table. And so generally in the charter, it speaks to those topics in both intent and commitment. Wherever you see this, there's pieces about regional interests and about the interests that you're here to represent. What we said was that when it came to getting to the CAG framework document, and so we'll be getting to that in the next section, there are words that talk about region-wide representation. Sorry, I'm pulling out two documents at the same time. And in that one, Juliana talked about balanced representation from both Washington and Oregon. So it seemed that there are words that help with the spirit and intent in both. And that when I was talking to people before this meeting, that people said that they were sufficiently comfortable to leave the charter language as it was, as long as people are really clear with each other about what does representation look like on the CAG. And quite honestly, that was the hope, was that this group could be very forthright in saying, when you are here on behalf of the region, what does representation look like on the CAG? And we're now also going to have an equity advisory group. And so just having the opportunity to say why interest should be there, okay, organizations or individuals. So I don't know if that's helping.
No, that helps. That helps quite a bit, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can think of numerous organizations that that represent the region, and so that makes perfect sense. I just thought it would be, you know, appropriate to highlight that, but I think the charter looks great.
Okay, all right, and thanks for bringing it up, and thanks for the work between the meeting and talk about it. So as I'm heading back up the list, I next go to Kristen Leonard.
And we concur with the charter. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. And next will be Sean and then Doug.
Yeah, I concur with the charter. I share the same concern that Juliana does, that we have discussed before, that sparked a secondary conversation of not just equal representation between Oregon and Washington, but some of these other counties on the periphery who may not be directly impacted, but should probably be a part of the group. But I definitely agree with the charter, but I want to remain on record as agreeing with Juliana that between Washington and Oregon, there has to be equal representation in this conversation.
Okay, all right. All right, and thank you for that, Sean. So Doug and then President Peterson.
Yes, TriMet is prepared to support this as written.
Great, and then Lynn.
Metro is up for support.
All right, thank you so much for that. All right, next up is Scott Hughes.
Yeah, the RTC, we concur with the charter.
All right, thank you. And Mayor Ann, you're up next. Hope you're on mute. There you go.
There we go. Thank you. Vancouver City Council approves the charter, but we too share the same concern as Juliana and Sean, and not just with the Citizen Advisory Group, but with the Equity Group also.
Okay. Appreciate hearing from you. Thank you. And then City of Portland, Sonia.
Yeah, we concur as well. We think time spent on a charter is time well spent. So thank you to everybody who worked on it.
All right. Thank you very much. Secretary Millar for Washington.
We concur.
Okay, thank you. And then Brendan for Oregon.
ODOT concurs.
All right. Well, I'd like to congratulate you. Where's Greg? If you want to help congratulate that we do have concurrence and we have consensus support for your draft charter turning into an approved charter. So congratulations.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you for all the hard work that went into reviewing. And one of the things that I want to assure the entire team, my role as a program neutral, representing both Oregon and Washington, is that the concerns regarding equitable treatment on either side of the river is something that I take very seriously, and that it's my role to ensure that voices are heard and reacted to. So that's my commitment back to the team.
All right, powerful words and powerful intent and interest from all of you. So much appreciated and kudos. So we are ready to move on to the next topic, and it is an update regarding equity considerations and standing up the community forum. And I think if we need an introduction or if we want to go right into this, Janelle, you have your screen on. I think you're leading off, correct?
I am here, Deb, and I'm prepared to kick off if you like, or however you want to proceed.
I think I'm just going to say we're happy to have Janelle Bell with us today. Handing it over to you.
Great. Well, good afternoon, committee, and congratulations on a terrific seminal accomplishment of approving your charter. As Deb indicated, I'll be prepared to provide an overview of where we are with respect to our equity thinking and consideration. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment just to thank all of you for designating equity staff from your agencies that we had a chance to work with as we were both conceiving and thinking through the creation of an equity advisory group. That group of equity leads will be critical as we move forward to ensure that we're building upon the great work of all of your organizations. You've all have done a fair amount within the equity realm. We want to benefit from that knowledge, as well as ensuring that we maintain that connectivity. As was referenced, we are standing up an equity advisory group to help steer the project's equity goals and ultimately really ensuring that equity is interwoven throughout the whole process. The purpose is to provide a laser focus on projects' potential impacts and benefits for communities of concern, communities of color, as well as really paying close attention to environmental justice. The goal is that this group will help to fulfill the IBR's leadership commitment to really prioritize equity throughout the course of the program. And what's important to note is, though we'll have an equity advisory group, it will be important that equity is the charge of all of our groups, as well as certainly, as you all indicated in the past, the ESG. To also monitor and provide oversight of equity throughout program and all elements, and to make recommendations to IBR leadership regarding the program's processes, policies, and decisions that have the potential to impact communities of concern, either positively or potentially negatively. Next slide, please. And thinking about the buckets of work, and this is a slide that I believe we referenced in the past, here are some of the things that we know starting off is going to be really important for the equity program as well as the equity advisory group. The first is defining equity for the IBR program. Again, that's why it's so critically important that we'll be relying upon all of your staff and really coming up with a synthesis of how equity is really defined in the region. As I always indicate, we want to start off with shared definition. So that's going to be critically important. Support development of desired outcomes and matrix to achieving equity. Once we define it, then we have to determine how do we measure our success towards that end. Framing the historical context, there's a fair amount of work that's already happening right now, just in our understanding of this corridor. There's so much history, whether you're talking about Vanport or the tribal history on the Vancouver side of the river. And it's really important when we talk about centering the voices of historically marginalized communities. In order that we center those voices, we first have to understand the history. So that's going to be a shining star for our work moving forward. Support implementation of the community engagement plan, support the DBE OJT plans. This will come later down the road. Of course, this is all the conversations around workforce diversity as well as DBE participation. Coordination with the community advisory group. Lisa will talk here in a moment about the CAG, but we've already are thinking about opportunities for both the equity advisory group and the community advisory group to work on buckets of work in a collective manner such that we have that cross-pollination. So that's really critical. And then longer term work plan is really thinking about as mitigation strategies potentially come up, which are always really important, as well as including lessening impacts from potential financing options, input on design elements, and other issues as they arise. Next slide, please. Thank you. In standing up the equity committee, we will be looking essentially for three specific criteria. The first is around equity practitioners. We want to tap into equity practitioners with the expertise needed to make informed recommendations. We are so fortunate in this region. Frankly, our region is a national leader amongst other government agencies across the nation with respect to advancing equity. So we want to tap into that great brilliance. We want to make sure that we have representatives from our community-based organizations, again, on both sides of the river, focus on racial equity, social climate justice, and culturally specific concerns, making sure that we are tapping into that, as well as community members. And we'll talk here in a minute about our timeline for outreach and providing opportunities to the collective community to make application to serve on these committees. We want to make sure that we have voices from the broader community, particularly those who are experiencing transportation barriers firsthand. That's going to be important. So with that, I will turn it over to Lisa to share a little bit about the Community Advisory Group.
Thank you, Janelle. So we're excited to co-facilitate this Community Advisory Group with our two co-chairs, Ed and Lynn. This is the purpose statement that we had shared with you at our last meeting. It hasn't changed. We are really looking for both organizations to serve that represent stakeholder interest groups that we had described at the last time that we met. We're also looking for individuals, and we think that it's really important to note that while this is one of the first and the most tangible ways for involvement in the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, it isn't the only. And if you had a chance to take a look at the materials that were presented at the Bi-State Legislative Committee last week, you'll see that we had a comprehensive community engagement plan. And we really want to ensure that if we have voices in the community that want to participate on either the Equity Advisory Group or the Community Advisory Group, that there are ways to do that, but there are also topical working groups that we'll be establishing that'll be specific to a topic. And we'll have lots of opportunities to not only bring our community members to the program, but also for the program to meet our community members where they are, in a real commitment to this idea of two-way feedback and transparency. So we just think that it's important to note that this is a tangible way to get involved right now. But at the beginning of January 2021, we're really launching an overall and comprehensive community engagement plan. Next slide. So the member eligibility criteria. This is the criteria that we reviewed at the first meeting and appreciated your support to move forward with our recruiting efforts and our outreach. It is a challenge to try and represent two states' interests in a group that has about 30 members. We have really appreciated the partnership with your staff helping us to identify those organizations that meet that, not only the eligibility criteria, but certainly meet our intent to have a balanced representation of both states and all of those 19 different stakeholder interest groups. I'm not going to read each of these criteria, but I think that I will pause and just see if there's any feedback at this point around the member eligibility criteria, or if anyone had any questions before we move into a little bit more of the process in terms of both our outreach and our recruiting effort.
So Lynn, is your hand up? Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for including language regarding the users of the regional network. Appreciate that much. And I just wanted to see if there was a way to even be a little bit more specific about I-205 and representation along I-205 in both states. I think I am 100% behind everybody about the balanced representation between Washington and Oregon. That was not the intent of the conversation. It was to get, as we just talked about, out a little further, but that's a huge part of our interstate network, and that understanding of how the highways function together and how these will benefit or impact each other is really important. So I just wanted to be a little bit more specific in making sure that the I-205 economic industries that are along there on both sides of the river have a chance to be participating and not just generic. I think it's really important because we didn't have that conversation last time, as I mentioned, and there are impacts and there needs to be mitigation.
I appreciate that comment, and I was pausing just to see if there's any other feedback or comments. Okay.
So
go ahead, Deb.
Oh, well, I was just thinking, and I don't know if this will help you or not, Lisa, but we had ready, if it was helpful, there's the 2-page CAG framework document that you reviewed with people last time. I know we've sent it out in advance. Do you want us to pull up the eligibility criteria piece of that, or what? Tell me what helps most to help be responsive to Lynn.
Well, I think it was certainly something that was mentioned at the last ESG meeting, and one that we have taken into account in terms of our outreach and recruiting. But I think it seems as though it's substantial enough that it may make sense to actually update the framework right now, if that makes sense for everyone to have Deb go ahead and do that. I think it might be the most efficient to get us to where we need to go in terms of the actual words we use. Does that make sense, Deb? Is that all right?
Yeah, if that's okay with people.
Okay.
I'd like to go ahead and get specific and make sure that it works for all ESG members. And I think, Lisa, especially with where you were going next, I hope I didn't jump too far ahead of the gun on it, because you're getting ready to kick off, the membership and nomination process. And so I just want to make sure for this group, everybody's on the same page. And so help me, Lisa, but I think where we are is in this section about eligibility criteria, and the group as a whole should be made up of, and there are these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullets. Is that a fair, help me if I'm in the right place?
Yes, absolutely, Deb.
I
And I think that there had been some modification to regional representation.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, perfect. Feel free.
Under a representative cross-section of the community with your users of the regional network, business or industry, add in including representation of economic considerations along the I-205 corridor, comma, travel patterns, diverse ages, blah, blah, blah. Do you see that sentence? Yeah.
Did you say something after along the 205 corridor? It stops, or is that it? That's the extra right there?
The comma, and I believe the next words in the actual sentence are travel patterns, so it would just continue on from there.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, I just want to make sure there wasn't anything else. And then can you, Kirsten, just for our help, Kirsten, how do you just put the including representation of in yellow, or just something so people can see it, because it's not showing it in track changes. And I can make so that would be the addition. And then, Lynn, can I ask you just a gentle nudge on my side about why that helps? What's your hope with this addition?
I think I've been trying to be very clear. This project has impacts and to the system, and the system-wide impacts. And so we want to make sure that we're hearing the voices of the direct users of I-205 as well as I-5 on both sides of the river, because we do have a system that whether it's during construction or the operation and maintenance of a new bridge, there will be potential diversions. And we have talked about diversions within the neighborhood and how important that is, but along the entire corridor of I-5, people driving the distance from state to state, especially, or even between the two states, will have a decision to make. And we want to make sure that we are including the economic potential benefits and impacts to I-205 as we make a system change. You can't separate these two out, and being able to hear the voices of how folks would use the system, whether it sits well, whether the diversion actually exists and how it can be impacted, is an important part of the conversation that was left out and then left without answers last time. And I think just making sure we include those questions because they are real and be more transparent about how we mitigate and discuss them. As I mentioned way back when when the project was first discussed decades ago now, for the first discussion, there was the scope of the project was actually shown as the project area was actually shown as being from I-5 down to I-84, up I-205 and over SR 500. So it tried to take into account what we already know. And when the scope got too tight, then we lost that conversation.
Thank you so much for the information, for offering a modification and for the explanation afterwards. I'd like to open it up for discussion. Anybody, either words to support, issues or concerns about adding the language, anything else you want to share as you're listening? You can kind of wave your hand to me because it's a small enough group, or go ahead and pop up your hand on the participant list, whatever works best. And silence will mean that you're comfortable with it. Oh, go ahead, Doug, sure.
Yeah, I think that's right, what Lynn's articulating here as I listen to this. The one suggestion I might add in here, when it refers to travel patterns, I would just put here regionally impacting travel patterns. There's some that'll be impact more than others, but I think it is important that we take a regional perspective, that this bridge doesn't look at the New Yorker's view of the west of the United States, so to speak, that this is the bridge, the only thing. It really has to be regional, and this is a part of that regional solution. So.
And Kirsten's making that yellow also, so we show that that's also a few words that got added in. Thanks for that, Doug. Anybody else, comments, reflections? Go ahead, Secretary Millar, sure.
Thank you, and thank you, Lynn, for bringing this up. I think it's an important issue. The only concern I would have would be, and I know that I-205 is the parallel route, through the region for I-5, but there are other economically significant corridors, US 30, 84, SR 14, that I don't want anybody to feel left out by being that specific about who we ask in. So I can live with this, but I want everybody to be thinking about what we are talking about is economic considerations, users of the regional freight network, if you will, because it's not just 205.
I would totally be open to including representation of economic considerations along parallel routes, including or such as I-205 and the others that you mentioned. But once we get to Highway 30, that's a pretty big region, but you are correct.
Yeah, I remember back in the day when the I-5 bridge went down, it was the bridge of the gods that was the option. And we need to, again, focus. So, but this is fine.
And then Brendan, I think your hand is up too.
Yeah, I think it pretty much covered. We're out in that corridor quite a bit. ODOT and our mobility office standing up a tolling program and hopefully funding a mega project out there. So maybe there's a way for the two programs to kind of combine efforts. I know we've been working on that to make sure we're all coordinated too, as we're asking the right questions and not duplicating it. So a really good suggestion by President Peterson, and perhaps it can be kind of folded into some of the work that we're doing regarding the tolling program on the I-205 corridor.
Helpful, Brendan, thank you. Others, thoughts, feedback, any concerns? Go ahead, Lynn, sure.
I would just offer that I appreciate the way that this was revised, in that it's not adding additional slots or representation, because I think it's a large advisory group already, and if it gets larger, it will be even more difficult. So I appreciate that interest in kind of cross-pollination. So thank you for that.
Okay, great to hear. Thank you for speaking up. Anybody else? Okay, I was going to come back to you, Lisa, just to make sure, you know, as I think about your role and I think about Janelle, your role, any questions or concerns you have? I like to practice the kind of straight talk, be forthright. Is this making sense? It's on deck. You haven't opened the doors yet, so it's certainly timely, right?
Yeah, this is John L. No, I think it's spot on. I think it's President Peterson makes a very important point, and that's the balancing act is ensuring that we have the perspective of our whole collective region, and you know, certainly this project impacts not just I-5, but certainly 205. And that's true also for the communities in our collective region. How we'll talk a little bit more about kind of the equity impacts, but we know that there's equity considerations on both sides of the river as well as regionally, and that's going to be an important factor as well. So I think this is spot on.
Great, helpful to hear. And Lisa, anything else?
I think that Janelle summed it up really nicely. We have begun our outreach, which I can speak to in the next slide. And we've tried to be really cognizant of ensuring that our outreach is not just in a couple zip codes in North Portland and in Southwest Washington, but that it's much broader than that. So probably a good pivot to the next slide.
Okay, can I have one more minute, Lisa? I just want to make sure my understanding, since we'd heard from ESG members and you spoke up, that if there's nobody else wants to say anything, that you're all okay with the additions in yellow. So I'm going to pause. If everybody's giving me a thumbs up, which I really appreciate. It's just so hard when I'm not in the room with all of you. I have to triple check. Okay, so I want to go back to President Peter and say thank you for speaking up. I want to say thank you to the group for working in a collaborative way, and that language will be added to the CAG framework document, and then it'll also be incorporated into the rest of the pieces that Lisa and Janelle will talk about. Thank you, thank you. All right, Lisa, moving on.
Great. So this graphic and this slide really shows the two paths to participation with both the community advisory group. And I will just mention that we are doing some outreach together with the equity advisory group. We want to make sure that when we go out to the community that we're not going out two different times. So there's confusion between what am I saying yes to and what is the difference. So instead, we've really tried to make sure that both efforts are being done simultaneously. So the first way for an individual to get involved in the community advisory group would be to apply. And those applications are anticipated to go live tomorrow. Our applications will be online. We also have a phone number so that if there are any individuals that can't or don't want to fill out an application online, that we're happy to walk them through that application and make it accessible to them as well. We are also looking at an appointment process. Now, the difference between an appointment process and an application process is the differences between an at-large position or an individual who'd like to serve on the community advisory group versus an organization. So when we think of an organization, we think of a coalition potentially of like-minded organizations that might have similar members, or we think of an organization that might be specifically oriented around one of those particular stakeholder interest groups. You might recall that we had identified 19 different groups. We have a commitment to balanced representation on both sides of the river. So if you were to choose one organization to represent each interest group and multiply it by 2, we far exceeded the number of community advisory members that we were hoping to have, which is about around 30 based on the feedback from the last ESG meeting. So this is a difficult task to look at how many organizations can make up this appointment pathway to involvement. We are anticipating approximately 20 of our community advisory members will be representative of an organization. And best case scenario, they're representative of a coalition of organizations so that we're not needing to have 3 from one particular area, but instead one that coordinates with the others. We have really appreciated the partnership with each of your agencies We've gotten really good feedback on the organizations that they feel are important to ensure have a voice at this community advisory group table. And they've also shared with us particular members that they would be interested in recommending to serve on behalf of that organization. We're still working through that process. We began with a list of 308 different organizations from both sides of the river. So it is for certain a task that is difficult to do because there are so many different organizations that would like to be able to be represented at this particular table. Again, I just want to note there'll be lots of different opportunities to be engaged in this conversation around the replacement of this bridge. On the application side, I'll let Jonelle speak a little bit more to some of the ways that we're trying to reach individuals in the next slide. But I do want to just add that we have selected the selection committee, and we've intentionally chosen to keep that committee small. So that will include Greg Johnson as the program administrator, and then our two co-chairs, Ed Washington and Lynn Ballantyre. And then we'll also have Jonelle participate as our Chief Equity Officer for the program. So the group will be relatively small to make that selection process happen in the timeframe that we need it to happen and in the way that is transparent and open. They'll use the eligibility criteria, and we anticipate being able to bring back to this group by the first part of January a list of recommended members to serve on the community advisory group. Just wanted to note before we kind of pivot to the next slide that those applications are anticipated to be open tomorrow and will stay open until December 18th. So not a lot of time, it's quick. We have significant outreach. We've sent out the recruiting flyer that kind of describes how to get involved. We've sent that to 251 organizations, and we have about another 50 that we'll send out that flyer to this week. That includes organizations outside of, as I mentioned, just the Southwest Washington and the North Portland region, but actually into Clackamas County and Washington County as well. So much broader regional representation. We have a robust digital and print advertising that will begin, social media, and then a postcard mailing. So a lot of different ways to try and catch those individuals' attentions that might be interested in serving. So with that, I think that's,
yeah,
it's
thank you. Thank you, Lisa. As Lisa indicated, we are planning for a pretty robust community engagement effort to ensure that our collective community, those who are interested, have an opportunity of learning more about the program. Some of what we'll be doing is just basic education, letting folks know that this effort has kicked off, but also sharing, as Lisa indicated, opportunities for engagement. So we are holding a number of listening sessions that will be made available both in English as well as the languages that you see indicated here. And it's important to note that we'll both be providing translation as well as interpretation services. So, you know, part of our effort to really ensure that we are providing an opportunity for the whole community to be engaged. Next slide, please. And just kind of to summarize, we all know this is running at a fast pace. This is just a slide to kind of illustrate the ways in which we'll be obviously engaging with all of you, the ways we'll be engaging with your staff, and of course, when our co-chairs will be meeting, as well as when the recruitment will be taking place. So just wanted to provide that for you as well. And next slide. And so to summarize, our next steps is we'll be conducting, as we indicated, joint community advisory group and equity advisory group recruitment. That starts live officially tomorrow with our first information session. But as Lisa indicated, we're already starting to get the word out. We'll also be formalizing processes for coordination between the EAG, the CAG, and the ESG. I know Greg will talk a little bit more about that here in a few moments, as well as beginning monthly meetings beginning mid to late January. We thought it was critically important that we stand up both the EAG and the CAG around the same time in January, such that there are opportunities for the cross-pollination, as well as to ensure that we are building this in a way that is considering equity. Next slide. And so to summarize, there are kind of a couple questions that we're wanting to hear from you. The first is, what strategies would you recommend we employ to increase awareness of these opportunities with our communities? And the second is, are there items you feel strongly the community advisory group and the equity advisory group should consider or provide feedback on as we begin to develop work plans for both of those committees? So with that, Deb, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa and Janelle, and so much information to share, and thank you for getting it across in a really concise way. We do hope for members of the executive steering group that this is making sense, that it's really resonating with you, and when you think about the interests you represent, the way you have such extensive and deep knowledge about the region and about the communities of interest, and opening the door wide to bring in the diverse voices that are needed to really make this program succeed. We're hopeful that this really is making sense and resonating. The questions, I think, are warming them up today. And I just want, I'll pause in a minute to see if you have anything you want to speak to right now. And as importantly is, if you remember, you've got a staff level group that's really your conduit directly to the staff. And they're actually meeting tomorrow. And then they're meeting again in 2 weeks. They meet every other Tuesday afternoon. And so in between your meetings, please know that you can always tell them to transmit messages to staff. Our interest is that this program stay nimble and on literally a daily basis. If you have feedback or concerns that come forward, please find your staff, get it to them, or get it to any of the people you see on the screen directly. So with that, just a quick pause. Anything that you'd like to say right now? Sonia, go ahead, and then Kristen.
The clarifying question, I think I lost track of this, I'm sorry. Who technically appoints these folks? Who seats these bodies?
Greg,
No, you're not jumping in to answer that.
Oh.
Greg, were you going to answer?
I was just going to say, these bodies are seated by the IBR team. So they are independent of us. They give advice and consensus review, but they are technically creations of the IBR team.
And then Kristen?
Yeah, so maybe this is a little bit of a follow-up on that. I thought on the calendar, Janelle, you had endorsement blocks of time in January for endorsements from the various teams. So are you asking for the different groups to give a thumbs up to the final list of names, or is it more just this is an informational presentation of here's who's going to be sitting on these different groups? I guess I'm a little bit confused as to what an endorsement means and whether there's more that we should be doing as a group relating to kind of who's represented at that table.
Sure, I'm happy to take that on. Unless Greg, I'll yield to you as well if you'd like to weigh in.
And I can weigh in on this. And we had plenty of conversation about how this is to be done. We've been having conversation with members of your staff who have made recommendations. So we're gonna take this group that is selected and give it to back to your staff to transmit to you for confirmation of who was selected to be on the team.
Got it. So on that timeline, the January endorsement, that is we will all have had a chance to kind of see what the makeup of the team, and then we come together as a group to give our thumbs up endorsement of the bodies at that
Yes.
endorsement meeting. Okay, thank you.
Just to add a little bit to that timeline. So that's a December 1 open application, December 18th close, interviews the last week of January, back to the staff, the last week of December, sorry, Lynn, last week of December. And then we're back with the staff level group providing recommendations, hoping to stand up this group with invitations to all of those community members to attend a meeting at the end of January. Very, very tight timeline. So we'll be in a lot of communication with the staff.
Yeah, and it's where that word iterative really comes up. You know, officially since this all began, which we know is just early November, but you know, well before, with helping to plan the framework, please feel free, you know, check in with your staff, check in with Lisa, check in with Janelle, any of us, and let us be helpful. And you know, think of it as a funnel. It's really important, these beginning points of contact, about organizations to contact or individuals to reach out to, or making sure. And that question that we put on the slide about what strategies do you recommend we employ to increase awareness about opportunities. So if there's ways to get the word out, ways to get it out on the street, you know, big and bold, and let people know, please help. And then it is an endorsement. And on the slide for next steps, we use the word concurrence, Kristen. You know, it's kind of in the same, and it's in that same vein of wanting it by the time it gets to you in January to really, again, it's resonate and work for people. Anybody else? Questions, concerns, feedback? Okay, well, thank you so much. And please don't hesitate if you think of other things, just check in. All right, so we're about to transition to the next piece of the agenda, but I wanted to pause for 1 second to our audience that's here and say thank you again. And just as a reminder, if you happen to be watching by YouTube live stream, but you're interested in providing public input, you have to hop over to the Zoom portion and sign in on the Zoom. You'll be an attendee and you raise your hand. We see we already have a couple hands up for when we do public input, because you can't do it from the YouTube live stream. You've got to be on the Zoom call. So just as a heads up, find your way over. The information for how to log in is there on the website. And we're going to continue now. We have 2 more sections before we get to public input. So thank you, Lisa, Janelle, thank you everybody on this really important topic. And the next section that we're moving on to is the information. It's called high-level recommendations development. So if we want to go to the next slide, and I apologize, there is no break in this quick meeting, but we're going to keep on moving. And there's a lovely graphic here that Greg Johnson is going to help us walk our way through together. Go ahead, Greg.
So this slide is seeking to graphically represent how the groups will be interacting, providing consensus positions to the program administrator and the program administration team, and how we take and compare those decisions to other decision makers and jurisdictional authorities, how we compare it to purpose and need, vision and values, and how we communicate with the bi-state legislative committee. So we've wrestled with this and we've had more arrows than you would care to see put on here. But this is a simple representation of how we believe the process should and will work best to make sure we have a constant voice to the bi-state ledge group. That was one of the weak points that we heard from our last effort, that folks felt that they were not up to speed on certain issues. They didn't have points to weigh in. So we're trying to clean that up, and we're making sure that voices are heard and there are iterative processes for any decision where consensus cannot be reached before it gets to the bi-state ledge committee. So this is our attempt to bring structure to a process that is going to have a lot of moving parts. We recognize that there are folks who are going to talk to legislators directly, and that's folks' prerogative. What we show the arrow between the program administration team and the bi-state is for official positions that have been shared and consensus reached, going up to the bi-state ledge for their input, and they're giving us oversight and guidance back on those issues and ideas presented to them. So we recognize there's folks who are going to take the more direct route so their voice is heard differently with their legislators, and we understand that is the representative nature of legislatures. So we don't have concerns with that, but that white arrow that you see, that is the arrow of official information sharing from this team to the bi-state group. So one of the key things is that we are operating under a consensus mode. The power of each of these groups is reaching consensus and bringing that consensus to the program administration team. And if you guys say, this is where we want to go, and there is consensus with all the advisory groups and the executive steering group, the chances of that decision getting changed or overridden, as long as it fits with the permitting process in the federal jurisdiction, the chances of something getting changed by the program administration team is very, very small. So what we're trying to do is give power to the community advisory group, the equity advisory group, the executive steering group, for you guys to reach consensus and bring it to us so we can, once again, compare it with purpose and need, vision and value, and take it to bi-state for their input, oversight, and eventual concurrence. So this is a key important document that our team, the program administration team, is going to hope to live by, and that it's going to hope to avoid having anybody feel like they haven't been communicated with, or they haven't had a chance to have their voice heard in this process. So with that, I will open it up to any questions or concerns that anyone may have.
Lynn, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for all the work on this. Making something this clear is not easy. So thank you for that. I'm just going to repeat what I asked for in the Rose Corridor project, which is just this, that obviously we have CAG co-chairs who can speak directly to us. But when we start to look at the equity advisory group and the community advisory group, I would just encourage us to give opportunities to members of those committees that have never had the opportunity to speak or present their ideas, or whether it's consensus or the points of non-consensus, just giving those folks that haven't had that opportunity before a chance to meet with us directly and not have it go through staff. I would prefer to hear directly from the members, even if it's all helped and presented. Obviously, staff works with them directly, but I think it behooves us to be able to encourage leadership growth and allowing us as executive to be able to hear a range of voices, not just the staff. Thanks.
Understood. And it is our position that the ESG will always have invites to either of these groups, and we will be bringing issues of imminent concern from these groups. And I have no concerns with stepping out of the way and not being the translator or the middleman between these groups, talking to the executive steering group. So no problem from my viewpoint.
And I wanted to say that our interest is actually proactively to ask rather than wait for people to request. And we wanted a team with the co-chairs, first and foremost for the CAG co-chairs, and it'll be the same with the EAG, to say before each meeting, is there anything you'd like to bring forward? And if so, who'd like to bring it forward? And leave a space on your agendas to always have that opportunity. Because that two-way information sharing is really powerful and important. And the direct voices, thank you for bringing it up, I think are just critical to building any kind of credibility and traction for the program. So thank you. Yeah, really nice. So Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, I just I do want to thank the committee for the work on this. I think it is a lot of working pieces here. The one thing this doesn't reflect is kind of the rules of play for me, and not that it has to, but I would just hope the advisory committee never comes to the executive steering committee without having prior gone to the program administrator. So there's no end runs. And I've seen this before in other structures, but people don't like where they think it's going. They kind of put pressure through an ESG type structure on the program administrator. So I just asked for one of the protocols or rules of play is program administrator first, advisory groups come to the ESG second. So we don't want to shut the doors, but I just want to be respectful of protocol.
Understood. I think that's a great clarification.
Doug?
Yeah, Ed, go ahead.
Doug, I'll never cross you, okay? I'll always go there.
That's funny, Ed. That's good.
No, I appreciate you saying that. It's nothing that I had in mind of doing, but I think it is good to get the rules of the game out up front, and that way no one can say I did not know that. So thank you very much. And I would just also like to say to Greg and everybody, that the staff and everybody, this is really nice. It makes so much sense now. You know, of course, you're waiting for the pieces to get together. And thank you all very much for how you've laid this out. And also to Lynn, thank you for your additional input. You know, this brings back lots of memories to me. You know, after you've been away from Metro for 20 plus years, it goes out of your head, but it's sort of nice to be back, seeing how we really do get things done. And there's no reason why we can't get this up to the next step and ultimately to the bridge. So thank you very much for your input and help. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for the words. And Mayor Ann, yes.
Deb, I may have misunderstood Doug, but in looking at this chart, it shows that the two advisory groups can go directly to the program administrator. Did I misunderstand Doug's comment there?
Well, Doug, what I thought was he was worrying about is when you see the arrow can go straight over to the ESG. I think he's saying he wants to make sure that the program administrator is also in the loop about. Correct, Doug?
That is correct.
Yeah. You know, it's this thing about how do you do arrows to make sure you can show it's both iterative and it's kind of going in all directions, really, when you think about it, right?
Yeah, the thought process I'm looking at when I look at a chart like this, Deborah, is that you've got the advisory groups going to the program administrator.
Mm-hmm.
You also have the advisory groups going through the executive steering committee. But in both cases, the ESG and the advisory groups both feed back into the program administrator as the primary function. So recognizing that, I just wouldn't want to see a scenario, not that there would be one, but if I go to crunchy corners, who knows what topics come up, where an advisory group, I think, I'm hopeful in all cases, the program administrator should not be surprised or informed around issues from the advisory committee without the ESG at least being, they would come second at least. So they shouldn't be surprised where the ESG has come to the program administrator going, we're now hearing this, whatever it is. And I just want to, I think we really need to empower the program administrator to be successful in that team. And I think from my perspective, both those arrows lead to the program administrator anyway. So I would hope it would just go direct the advisory group there first. And if they need to come to the exterior ESG, that's okay too, of course.
Yeah, because the way this is looking right now, that's a solid arrow that says to me, those advisory groups can talk directly to the program administrator. Did you want to use a different kind of arrow?
I would hope, Mayor, they would talk directly to the program administrator. That arrow should show it. I just wouldn't want to, they're of equal weight to the ESG and to the program administrator. I would just hope a situation wouldn't surface where the advisory groups have gone to ESG to raise matters or report on matters that otherwise the program administrator hasn't heard about. So it's just more of a protocol, not, you don't want to ever shut down communication, but it's just making sure that no surprise management, in my mind, it's not good, healthy, that the program administrator is not aware of at least what's going to ESG, at least the topics.
I agree, Doug. I'm just not sure that people looking at this chart the way it is without having that background information would understand those same protocols.
Yeah, so that's what I was suggesting. This may not be the place for it, but somewhere in here, there should be a companion, at least one pager that says, these are the rules of play behind the chart. And if it's articulated there, then for me, that aptly covers it.
So one of the reasons for the solid arrow between the advisory groups, that a part of that is the role of the co-chairs of the CAG, both Ed Washington and Lynn Valenter, communicating back to the executive steering group on which they sit, but they are also the co-chairs of the community advisory group. So my take on that is that Ed, Lynn, and myself are going to become best friends over the next number of years, because we will be communicating issues and concerns back and forth to make sure that there are no surprises, that when they come to take on their role of sitting on the executive steering group, that issues that they bring forward have already been discussed thoroughly with myself and the program administration team.
You're absolutely right, Greg, and I understand that part, and I'm excited about that. What I don't understand is that we do not have co-chairs on the Equity Advisory Group, and that group actually could be larger than the Community Advisory Group. So I'm trying to figure out how that group advises everybody.
So the Equity Advisory Group has several key functions. Number one, they're going to define what is equity for this program, but they also are going to look at issues that are directly related to equity that may come out of the executive steering group, that may come out of the community advisory group. And they're going to look at that and run it through their filters of, is this equitable for all of the different interest groups on this project? So theirs is a function of, they're going to look at things that are derived. They may derive their own ideas that will go through the community advisory group and through the executive steering group, but their role is to provide that lens of oversight to, okay, are these ideas equitable? And all of that is hard to show on a one-page graphic, but adding some other language as the equity group is stood up. We will make sure that that is clarified.
Greg, I think that's right. I think it's less relevant when things go well. It becomes more relevant when things are stress tested, whatever those topics or ideas are. So that's where my mind is where if we end up with information flow or being stress tested, there is not agreement. And sometimes that can happen. So that's the spirit that I'm trying to look at this. And if you can articulate that behind this document, so it gives its context articulated, not in this chart. It's hard to capture that in a chart. So that's the only thing I would ask.
Understood. We will work on that clarification.
Yeah, really helpful feedback. And it's important, you're a bit of a focus group testing with this slide. It's, it's just been shared in a couple places here in the Bi-State Legislative Committee, but it is important that people understand the flow. And so let us work a bit with those arrows that Greg's talking about, right? And a little bit of the backstory that helps to support this. Appreciate it. If it's okay, we're going to move on. And we first want to welcome Director Strickler. Hi, glad to have you with us. Thank you for being here. Do you want to go off mute so we make sure your audio works? Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. My apologies for being late, but I'm here now. So nice to see everybody.
Glad to have you. Brendan let everybody know, so thank you. I do want to say this next section that we have, Chris Regan has the challenge of taking a 20-minute presentation and trying to tighten it up a little bit. And he is doing an introduction, right? So I think that'll help. And I don't know, Greg, if you have a few words you want to say just to help him jump in.
I don't. Jump in, Chris.
I know, Chris. I think
Water's
just to help.
Fine.
I know. We're just going to let you get going, Chris. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I promised Deb that I was going to catch us up, so I'll do my best here. I'm going to move a little quick. My name is Chris Regan. I'm the environmental manager for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Really excited to chat with you today about conversations that our office has had with federal highways and federal transit administrations. And as we start planning for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, I want you to know our environmental office has thought a lot about how we're going to conduct analysis. The presentation today is going to go over three main focus areas. What do we do? Past analysis, including a lot of the technical work that we've done that hasn't really changed. Reevaluating that work in today's context, and then plotting our path forward. Next slide, please. So let's start with past work. That work the work that went into defining the Columbia River crossing and its impacts was extensive. That process involved many of you here in the Zoom, or at least your organizations. It was work that involved public, agency, and tribal meetings, identifying impacts and negotiating the best way to minimize the project's effect. That work led us to a locally preferred alternative and a NEPA record of decision, or ROD, to meet our project's purpose and need. The ROD for CRC was signed in December 2011, 9 years ago. Our program is reviewing data from this work to understand its relevance, and we plan to leverage prior analysis and engage the community to define our program moving forward. Next slide, please. So the environmental effort on the previous started with development of the project's purpose and need, recognizing that the solutions we must consider for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program is within the same corridor and that the needs largely still exist in some form today must be considered as we begin anew. In fact, the work of CRC provides context for our charge today. The effort over the next 6 months will work on validating context and updating the purpose and need with the community. Next slide. So what does that mean to us? How do we begin to understand today's context? Our planning and environmental work will bring forward previous analysis into our current context. It will button up the CRC project, help us focus on what we need for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. So we're going to look at changes to the project area, changes in regulations, change in project needs. Those changes, along with previously defined constraints and commitments, provide the context we must use to advance the program. We need this context to create a strong foundation for moving forward. We've discussed the need to create a supplemental environmental impact statement for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program with our federal partners. That work will be completed in coordination with you, your staff, and our community. Next slide, please. So as you all know, this is a very constrained corridor. Here's an example of the rich data we have from CRC. This graphic comes from the Parks and Historic Resources technical work that was done. Uncovering, documenting, and negotiating constraints of project design and developing commitments for addressing those constraints was a major task of the previous endeavor. That work represents important context that we need to understand as we define today's solutions. Next slide. And there's a lot of constraints. Federal agencies refer to analysis of all the constraints as the NEPA umbrella. NEPA is where all the permits and authorizations, the consultations and coordinations come together, and measures to avoid, minimize, and mitigate those impacts are detailed. These are time-intensive, substantive reviews with consequential outcomes that must be considered for program success. These constraints and commitments are an important part of our context. Next slide. So moving forward, once we understand the context that we are working within, work to supplement our NEPA analysis begins. This work draws upon the feedback and guidance of the executive steering group, and together we will update the program purpose and need, establish the community vision and values, and use those vision and values to screen alternatives to be considered. Impacts of those alternatives will be documented and will be open for review and comment as defined by our tribal and agency coordination and public engagement plans. Next slide, please. This is what we heard from you so far and what the ESG has identified as important. During our NEPA process, the conceptual executive steering group issues list will be addressed. The ESG will provide feedback and help guide a number of issues that drive the NEPA process. Next slide. So the first big task, and we've talked a lot about this already, is to update the program's purpose and need. Purpose and need describes what must be addressed from a transportation perspective. Next slide. The executive steering group will also review the community vision and values. The vision and values will identify specific regional values and goals that the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program should look to attain as alternatives are being developed. In NEPA, vision and values become the screening criteria for alternatives that will be considered. Next slide. So we will be working with you in the community over the next few months. At your next ESG meeting, we'll start digging into this work. The process is very similar for updating purpose and need, as well as establishing the community vision and values. We will review prior work, provide an opportunity for engagement and feedback, develop and validate an approach, again, provide an opportunity for engagement and feedback, establish a draft, again, provide engagement and feedback, and then establish and validate that final statement, those final statements. Next slide. Another important aspect of NEPA is ensuring tribal, agency, and community engagement. The executive steering group and community and equity advisory groups are all part of this, but the program will also reach out further into our community. Project team will convene a collaborative agency group to meet regularly and address environmental compliance with federal, state, and local regulations, including endangered species, national historic preservation, Coast Guard permits, wetland permits, shoreline management, all of those things. We'll also initiate tribal consultation with all interested tribes and create public comment opportunities throughout the NEPA process. Next slide. So the NEPA process is defined by our federal partners and informed by our community. Reviewing details of our past efforts, defining those details in today's context, considering how to meet today's challenges and supplementing our analysis, and engaging our partners, stakeholders in the community throughout it all is our strategy for conducting a successful NEPA process. Next slide. And Deb, this is where I hand it back to you.
Chris, that was very impressive. Chris took like a week-long course on NEPA highlights and put it into about 7 minutes. And I I know that was challenging, so thank you so much, Chris. I want to emphasize, especially to our audience here, all of these slides, the whole presentation will be posted on the website right after the meeting today. And to everybody here in the room, the same with you for our ESG members. This is a really interesting and deep topic, and a lot of these slides are going to come back to you in January, okay, as we kick off the actual process. What we wanted to do today was really just introduce the work plan, if you will, for the big buckets of work starting first thing next year. So I want to just pause to first our ESG members just to see anybody, any either reaction, response, questions on this topic. It's really exciting to get to, as you said right in your openings, you all said, let's get on with that already. Let's get to the work. That's what this is. It's rolling up the sleeves and getting ready to work. Greg, anything else?
No, nothing from me, Deb.
All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much. Couldn't have done it in a better way. So we have those slides available to us. And again, we'll begin to do that work first thing next year. What I want to do now is, again, because I do this a lot, but I really mean it. It's hard because we're here in a virtual setting that we can't see all the audience that's with us, but we know we have at least 120 people via the Zoom meeting. And last time we had at least another 60 or 80 via the live stream. So we can't thank all of you enough for being here. It means the world to us that you're making time out of all the other things you could be doing right now to be here. What I do see is that on the attendees list, I have 5 people that would like to provide public input. So as a reminder, I'm going to do my hard math here. I have 10 minutes. So I'm going to give you each 2 minutes. And we're really grateful. We hope you can be concise in your 2 minutes. Say what you need to say on topics that are relevant to today's agenda. Uh-oh, the numbers just went up because the hands went up. 2. No, stop. The hands keep coming up. It may be 1 minute each, but I'm going to remind you that you can also provide public input in writing or via a voicemail message. We gave that information at the beginning of the meeting. We can do it again. If you go to the next slide, Kirsten, while I'm talking, it'll just help them see kind of the reminders. I think I'm probably going to have to ask for 1 minute each, and I am going to use my phone as a clock. And when I wave my phone at the screen, that means your time's about up and you're going to be put back on mute. And I'm trying hard because I'm uncomfortable and I don't want to cut people off, but I think it's the only way to be fair. Okay, so I'm going to call on a person and then they're going to be unmuted. They get their minute, which I'm going to use my official clock, and then you'll be muted again when your minute's up and I'll call on the next person. So I see Tom Dana's up first and Karen Gibson will be next. So Tom, and please introduce yourself, and if you have an affiliation, please say so. Hi, Tom.
I'm Tom Dana and I live on Hayden Island. And I was very active back in 8, 9, and 10 with the CRC project. And a couple of things out of that. One, there was an environmental justice group that was formed, and it was a whitewash. They didn't really care at all. So I'm concerned about that. 2, I was on the committees that we met over in Vancouver, seems like a lot of meetings, and about the width of the number of lanes crossing Hayden Island, which was up to 21 lanes at one point in time, and that's just way too many. So my concern is that the same thing will happen again. That is, an environmental justice group, which is probably equity, will run over us, and the same with the number of lanes on Hayden Island.
Tom, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us, Tom. And next up is Karen Gibson, and then we'll move on to Kimberly Kinchin. Go ahead, Karen, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Karen Gibson, and I'm just a community member who lives in the Arnada neighborhood of Vancouver. And I would just like to ensure that the community advisory group, and I will admit that I'm being shameless in the fact that I'd like to be a part of that, but I think that it would be great if the community advisory group includes people who have actually lived through a real experience of a bridge being down that is a cross-water region. I lived in the Bay Area when the Loma Prieta quake occurred. I helped recover businesses and move people around. And I think it's important to have a perspective of what it's really like when a bridge actually goes down that affects an entire region. So I think it would be great if on the community advisory group, we include people who have those real experiences. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. Appreciate it. So, I'm sorry, that was Kimberly. So next up is Joseph Courtwright and then Jackson Hurst.
And Deb, sorry, Kimberly is next.
Oh, Kimberly was up
Karen
next.
just
Okay, I see. Can you take Karen's hand down when they're finished? So I know it keeps moving people around my list. So Kimberly, you're up, and then Joseph Courtwright's after you. Thank you. Did we get Kimberly? Kimberly, are you on mute? Are you here? Kirsten, she's promoted. She looks like she's still on mute. Kirsten.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that.
There we go. Nope, now I'll start it. Go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment. My name is Kimberly Kinchin. I actually live in Seattle, although many years ago I lived in the greater Portland and Vancouver metro area. And I'm commenting because I-5 is a significant piece of the entire Pacific Northwest's regional transportation system. I have never had a driver's license because I've never been able to afford a car. And about 20 years ago, I took a big pile of paperwork and a photograph of myself to one of Seattle's neighborhood service centers to try to get a passport. And I was turned away because even though I had my Washington State ID card, it wasn't a driver's license. I wasn't a person in the eyes of my city because I didn't drive. And I had to walk home and wake up my boyfriend to come back and do the whole thing. And I say that to this committee because I have a lot more stories, and I guarantee you that thousands of people in the Vancouver and Portland areas also have similar stories of the ways in which our transportation agencies profoundly fail us. You might not know it, and I would be surprised if this
Kimberly, your time's up.
Oh,
Sorry.
thanks.
All right, thank you. Please provide more for people I'm having to cut off, which is very hard. Please provide some written comment and it'll be transmitted to executive steering group members. So next up is Joseph Courtwright and then Jackson Hurst.
I'm Joe Courtwright. I'm an economist in Portland. I'm taking a close look at some of the financial planning information. Just 2 points I'd like to make. First, please ask ODOT and WSDOT staff to falsely claiming that there's a need to repay the federal government $140 million. If we select the no-build alternative, FHWA regs provide there is no repayment liability. Second, there is a $1.1 billion arithmetic error in the financial gap estimate that was provided to the legislative committees last week. You mistakenly compared the low and low estimates of costs and revenues with the high and high. You should have compared the low revenue estimate with the high cost estimate, and that produces an additional $1.1 billion gap in the financing. Finally, you used a 1.9% inflation rate in inflating the numbers from the old CRC. The real highway cost construction index has been rising at 3% a year over the last decade. That would add another $600 to another $1 billion to the price of this project. So before you go any further, let's be honest and frank about the real financial situation.
Time's up. Joe, thank you for your comments. And Kirsten, can you click to the next slide too, so the people that aren't getting to say more are reminded of where they can submit their public input. And then I'll move on next to Jackson Hurst and then Alex Cavall. Go ahead, Jackson. Kirsten is just.
Hi, my name is Jackson Hurst, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I have a question. And that question is, can anyone join the community advisory group, even if they don't live in the area?
So I think we'll take that question under consideration, Jackson. Okay, and people can consider that for you. So thank you for being with us today. Appreciate it. So next up, if I have this right, because it's kind of moving around on here, Kirsten, I might need your help. Is it Alex?
Alex Cavall is next.
Alex Cavall, thank you.
Alex Cavall, followed by John, then Dave.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Alex. You're off mute, Alex, if you'd like to make your public input. I see they're off mute, Kirsten, but I don't see them on the screen.
Yes, they are unmuted.
Okay. May have stepped away. So do you mind, just for purposes of time, if we go on to John?
Hi there, John Lee Camus is a private citizen in the community. With regards to vision and values, the number one thing people value is their time. Therefore, the number one goal of this project should be to reduce the amount of time people spend stuck in traffic congestion. Issue number 2, what would the cost be of a simple seismic upgrade to the bridge rather than an elaborate project? Question number 3, will the Glenn Jackson Bridge come down in the same seismic event? If the Glenn Jackson Bridge survives, then we have a transportation corridor across the bridge. What sized earthquake would bring down the Glenn Jackson Bridge? We may be able to focus on something else rather than building a mega project. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so I think we're going to, it says Trolley Dave next.
Yeah, this is Dave Rowe, also known Trolley Dave. I live in Battleground, Washington, and I commute to Lake Oswego. And I'm asking, you talked about 205 and I-5 bridge both. How about the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Bridge? Is that going to be considered? Because I was a member of the high capacity, Clark County High Capacity Transit Study in 2008. And at that time, commuter rail was considered, but it's something in the future. Well, that was 12 years ago, and I think now is the future. So I'd like to just advocate that commuter rail be in part of the study, along with 205 and I-5 both. Denver is going to go with commuter rail, and they're building 11-mile commuter rail with electric power for $2.2 billion. That's half the price of that interstate bridge replacement. So that's something we're going to consider. That's my take. That's my story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave, for being with us. And Kirsten, I was going to give Alex Caval one more chance in case he came back. Do you want to just try one more time? Alex, are you here? Alex Caval? Okay, I think not. So I want to thank our public that were with us. I want to thank you for your input, for being brief and to the point, and we really appreciate it. And again, all of your comments are transcribed that come up in the meeting today, and anything you send before or advance is all transmitted to the executive steering group members. So please know that it's taken seriously, and we really appreciate it. We are moving on to next steps. The meeting went fast today. So if you could go on, Kirsten, to the next slide. And we're here talking about your upcoming meeting topics, the next steps out of this meeting and summary. And so if we go to this slide, Greg and I are going to team on at the next page. Thank you. So lots to do. Do you want to help with this piece, Greg?
Yeah, so in looking at this calendar, we have a busy early 2021. I tell folks we are up and walking. And once the advisory group and the equity advisory group and the community advisory group are stood up, we're going to be running fast to get to purpose and need and vision and values, because that is going to drive and be at the basis of all of the decisions regarding this project. That's the lens that we're going to compare decision making to, as well as permitting and federal oversight issues. So getting those teams stood up, having them wrestle with purpose and need, vision and value is going to be key.
Okay. I want to just pause before we see if there's any closing remarks from anybody. If there's just anything else on your mind, we actually have an extra 4 minutes. Like you did a lot of great work. Sonia put her hand up. Go ahead, Sonia.
I don't know how our timeline interacts or not with the bi-state committee, but I'm wondering if and when the conceptual financing plan is going to make its way back to this group for a briefing.
So tomorrow is when we submit that document, and it's once again, it's called a financial plan, but it is a very preliminary 20,000-foot view of possibilities. So that's something we're going to be continuously working on and bringing it back to this group, and as well as others. It is our plan and on our planning calendar for probably late summer, early fall, to have a more refined document as decisions are being made. So we think that issue will be a continual discussion, and we'll be bringing that back to this group on a regular basis as things get developed.
All right. Anybody else? Anything else on your mind? I'm going to, in a minute, turn to Greg for any closing remarks, and I'll ask Director Strickler or Secretary Millar if they have any closing comments too. But any other executive steering group members? Okay. Then I'll go to Greg first. Closing remarks.
So I just want to thank everybody, including the public and the commenters who took time today to participate. This is the essence of successful projects, is having input, having vibrant discussions. So we appreciate it. We appreciate the time that you guys are dedicating to this. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Director Strickler?
I will simply repeat what Mr. Johnson has said. Thank you very much. This is quite a dedication of time, so I appreciate everybody's involvement. So thank you very much for your investment here and the work that's in front of us, and I will give my thank you in advance for the next couple of years as well. So stay safe. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And Secretary Millar?
Yeah, I just echoed my thanks to the team, my thanks to the members of this group and your staffs, and to the graphics people at both agencies. I will point out that the sunset over my shoulder is much cooler than the sunset over Chris's. The other thing I would point out is that we are capable, when we put our heads together, of making great things happen across the Columbia River. We've done it before. Let's do it again. Thanks, everybody.
Much appreciated for the kind words, everyone. And I just want to say, it is November 30th, but this counts as your December meeting. So we're not actually going to see you in December. We are very close, closer than we've ever been to confirming your 2021 schedule. So very soon, we hope you'll be seeing there'll be a regularly scheduled 2-hour meeting each month on your calendar. And your schedulers are doing amazing work with our teams. We're finding it. We think we're getting there closer than we've been. So we want to wish you all the best in December. We want you to stay safe and healthy. We hope you have, when we get to it, a lovely holiday season. We will see you officially back in 2021. And until then, thank you for all your hard work and efforts.